welcome to the Heritage Minute Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Simon, class of 77. Today I have the honor of speaking with Major Retired Don Rightmyer, USAFA class of 73, who is joining us from his home in Kentucky. Like me, he has a love of history. Unlike me, who developed my passion for the field only about 20 years ago, his dates back to his cadet days. Don, thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Look forward to talking on these experiences with you.
Now, Don and I have communicated a lot over the past decade or so, drawn together by our mutual interest in history and heritage, primarily of the Academy and the Air Force. Don, please tell us about your initial involvement. Were you a history major here at the Academy?
Well, I was a history major as of my second class year. I actually started out as a civil engineering major, which was a big mistake on my part. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but anyway, I changed over during my second class year and declared as a major in history, and managed to get enough history courses under my belt in those last 2 years at the Academy to have it declared as my graduating major.
So, and you were also involved in history in other ways. I know you were your squadron rep for the Cadet Wing Heritage Committee. Is that correct?
That's correct. I was, as I said, I was in Deuce Squadron, Cadet Squadron 2, and I was elected by the guys in my squadron to be a member of the Cadet Wing Heritage Committee. And then when the entire committee met, they elected me to be the chairman of the committee. I don't have real vivid memories of that, but I know I was definitely the chairman because of the experiences that followed that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, shortly after that, I started having one-on-one meetings with the Commandant of Cadets, Brigadier General Walter P. Galligan, on a regular basis.
Well, and most people don't like to visit the comm, but I guess you were the exception, but obviously a little different situation than when most people visit the Commandant.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, I wasn't there for being a bad boy or anything or having problems, but it was interesting interfacing with the Commandant as a second classman, to say the least.
I can imagine. So as a missileer, I was very interested to learn that you had a role in the 9 December 1971 dedication of the Minuteman III missile. So those of us who've been around here know that was displayed in front of the field house, no longer there, unfortunately. But so as you mentioned, you were the chair of the Heritage Committee, so you got to speak at that event, correct?
Yes, I did. I had the opportunity to do that, and was not the keeper of paper notes like I have been in more recent years. So unfortunately, I don't think I have the notes that I made, but I had a prepared comment to make on behalf of the cadet wing, and they chose me to be the cadet that would speak to the dedication, and I enjoyed doing it. I remember that it was a very cold day, and I know back when they were preparing to take the missile down because of the erosion and degradation of it, I think it was a fear that the thing would potentially fall over. Mm-hmm. And so someone called me when I was working at the Kentucky Historical Society at the time and asked me about that. And I said, well, I basically gave prepared comments, but other than that, I can't really tell you much about it. And I think there was an article and a photo of me. It was published there in the Academy newspaper at that time when I was working at the Kentucky Historical Society up in Frankfort at that time.
Okay, yeah, and I can confirm there was, because in my This Day in Academy History date event research, I did come across the article and the picture of you speaking at that event. So, and you mentioned, of course, the missile was removed specifically on 20 August 2008. It was they had some issues with or concerns about asbestos, and like you said, the degradation of the missile. So, Minuteman III used to be here, is gone. Another important artifact that used to be here but is gone is the Doolittle Raiders goblets. There were 80 of those that were given to the Academy in perpetuity by General Doolittle, but Air Force Museum took them back. So, but I understand that you, while you were a cadet, you got to escort those cups to a reunion.
I did. Myself, as a second classman, and Cadet First Class John M. Duke, who was class of 72. We were designated by the Commandant to escort the Doolittle Raider goblet to Los Angeles. And they actually put I'm sure you're familiar with the display case that used to hang down by the cadet corps as I was. Mm-hmm. That they put that down and put it in what appeared to be a coffin. It looked like we were carrying a coffin when we carried it to the airline and then got to Los Angeles with it. But so we took that to the 1972 reunion of the Doolittle Raiders, which was held at the Sheraton Universal Hotel there in L.A. And I think we got there, I don't remember, we got there on a Thursday, and then the event started on Friday, and then we came back here on Sunday or Monday, I forget. But anyway, there was a large banquet that was held with the Doolittle Raiders that survived at that time, as well as all kinds of other people who came and who had a big banquet. And when John, cadet second, first class Duke and myself showed up, General Doolittle, of course, was still living, as were quite a few of the Raiders at that time. He turned to author C.D. Glines and asked him to give him a copy of the book that he had written about the Doolittle Raid. And then he basically, I would say, we understand that Harold gave everybody in the Doolittle Raiders order to sign the book, autograph the book. So both John and I left that weekend with a copy of that book by C.B. Glines, autographed by General Doolittle and all the other Raiders that were present at the banquet. And it was quite an experience, to say the least. The banquet was awesome. Meeting those guys, to me, I was in total awe as, a cadet of General Doolittle, of all the guys that had, done what they did on that raid. And they had an air show and a big banquet and just all kinds of things. But it was really quite an honor for General Doolittle and all those guys in the way in which the community honored them. And and for me and Cadet Duke, it was quite a privilege to be able to be there among those historical heroes, to us, and flown those missions, in the Army Air Forces. And so I look back on that with real fond remembrance, because it was quite an experience to get to meet all of that and to think about and know about what they did.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's like going to the All-Star game right there. Just
right.
A bunch of
All-Star of aviation combat.
Yeah, exactly. And as I recall, one of the poignant parts of those events was the turning over of the goblets for those who had passed away. So, or since the previous one, I imagine that was a very sober and moving moment during the banquet.
Right.
Yeah. So you had so many great historical opportunities, maybe just the timing you're here or just your interest or your avocation, but I understand you also attended the reception for the Gimbal Aeronautical Collection, which is one of my favorite things on the Academy that's displayed up in the McDermott Library. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I got to go and I don't know if there were any other cadets there, but I know I was there. And I got to, in the reception of that and the comments and all. And as I mentioned in notes I shared with you, it was the collection. I honestly, at that time, of course, had not been processed or anything. And I don't know that I ever actually personally had a chance to go and look at any of it. But the thing that was disappointing about was that Charles Lindbergh, known as the Lone Eagle, was in there for the acceptance ceremony, but unfortunately he was not able to make it. Of course, being the lover of aviation history as I am, I was very disappointed, and I never did get to meet Mr. Lindbergh, but he was supposed to have been there, and that would, of course, been super neat. But it was nice to be there and to hear the story behind how this collection had been gathered, and then, of course, for them to donate it to the Academy Library.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're very, very fortunate to have that here at the Academy. So after all that excitement, you finally did graduate, and you became a navigator, I understand. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Long story short, I was being pilot qualified when I entered the Academy, but my junior year, probably from too much studying, I don't know. My eyes went from pilot qualified to essentially non-pilot, non-flying qualified. But then the day I went over to cadet personnel to check on going into intelligence, literally that day, orders or message had come in from AFMPC showing that the requirement for vision had been reduced, so I was able to qualify to be a navigator. So I opted to do that. And then later in my Air Force career, I did actually work in intelligence, so I got to do both of those during my Air Force active duty side.
Nice. I know we spoke earlier, you mentioned your assignment to Lakenheath in England and how moving it was to see the World War II airfields, a la the film 12 O'Clock High that, of course, we've both seen multiple times. Would you describe that sensation to us?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I can't figure out exactly. I know I saw the movie 12 O'Clock High at least 4 different times. And I know 2 of them were in psychology classes, and 2 more might have been in some of the military history study that I had there. But I've always been a history buff or a aficionado of history. My initial interest in life was Civil War. I was 11 years old when the Civil War Centennial began. I was very much interested in that. And then as I got to the academy, I'd been very interested in, aviation. And so, of course, I've always enjoyed the opening of that movie. As you see guy standing there, who I remember was like an administrative officer or something in the B-17 squadron, and he's just standing there looking out at this deserted airfield, and then he suddenly starts hearing the airplane motors revving up, and so I really enjoyed that. Well, and as I went through my flying training and at Major and Navigator, and then got checked out in the F4s there at Homestead, Florida. And then my first assignment was, not my first one. My first one was actually to Korea. But then in England, as I said, sharing with you, as I took off on my very first sortie out of RAF Lakenheath, we were taking off. Lakenheath is located on the eastern side of England.
Right.
Great thing. And looking across the entire, you could see, of course, across the entire land of England there, you could see all these deserted World War II airfields.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, very, very visible. And it just reminded me, and always, every time we take off, it would remind me of 12 O'Clock High and all the, I can almost envision all the English Air Force Bomber Command and the U.S. Army Air Force's planes taking off out of there, And so it was quite an interesting experience to be there. I only got to stay there for a year. I was in F4s, and they were going to switch them out with F-111. So they did do that, and so I then moved on to Germany, and then I had I think about a 4-year assignment in Germany after that because of the switch out of aircraft.
Okay. Well, that's cool that you recognized and appreciated the site there with the British runways and the old World War II, how important they were to the freedom of the West. As your career progressed, of course, your penchant for history seemed to follow you around, and then I understand you were invited to meet Brigadier General John Houston, the Chief of Air Force History.
Yeah. Well, as I said, when the airplane change that took place at Lakenheath, I got reassigned to Hahn Air Base in Germany. Was flying F4s there, and I think I ended up spending a total of 4 years there. But while I was there, I was able to go to Squadron Officer School back at Maxwell Air Force Base, and did that for those 3 months, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Of course, being not only the professional military training part of the Air Force, but also the Air Force historical big, huge collection that's located there at Air University, and I did go over and dabble in that a little bit while I was there. But so I my section in Squadron Officer School I was in, I think I had, in my discussions with the leader of our, the senior officer was the leader of our SOS class, he gathered that I enjoyed Air Force history and all that kind of thing. So I finished up there. My wife and I went back to Germany, and one day I had, in that time frame, as I mentioned, I'd gotten grounded for that loss of vision in my right eye, and I had been, I was assigned to both the Vice Wing Commander's office. I was in charge of the Wing Complaints Program, which was very interesting. He used to say, one thing I knew about my job was that every person that walked through my office door was not happy. And then I was also assigned to cross the street to Wing Intelligence. So I would spend half a day working Wing Intelligence, going around the base and giving briefings to the 3 fighter squads we had. And then the other half of the day, I was working planes over in the other side. So anyway, one day I got a call from the headquarters USAFA history office, and then they said that General Houston, who was chief of Air Force history at the time, would like to talk to me. Would I be interested in talking to him down there at the USAFA history office? I said, sure. So I met with General Houston, and he didn't make any bones about it. He was definitely there to interview me as to whether he might want to hire me for the Air Force history office, which he did subsequently do. So when my tour ended up there at Rams, or well, there at Han, we got orders then to go to Washington, D.C., and I was assigned there as a historian in the Office of Air Force History, Bowling Air Force Base, for 2 years. They had the Air Force Soviet Awareness Program. I don't know if you ever were able to get those briefings that were given, but so I went over and talked to them, and they hired me. And so I did that job for 2 years. I had a very interesting job. I learned a tremendous amount about Soviet Union and all that was going on and had gone on in that country, during the years since the Russian Revolution, that kind of thing. And my boss had actually been air attaché in Moscow, and he actually had a Soviet Air Force lieutenant colonel's uniform that this guy's son had traded to my boss for 3 pairs of jeans, blue jeans. Blue jeans were a big, what you call it. Anyway, you could trade blue jeans in Russia at that time and get just about anything. So for 3 pairs of blue jeans, my boss, who was an Air Force lieutenant colonel, had gotten this guy's dad's uniform. I don't know what kind of trouble the kid got into, but anyway, turned out that the uniform fit me perfectly. And so one of the first things they got me checked out on the Soviet awareness team, but then one of the things they had me do was to try out for doing the introductory presentation that kind of set off the entire Soviet awareness program.
Wow.
And so I tried out for that, and I got to do that. And it was very interesting because in the time that I did that, I think I did that for 2 or 3 years. I remember one time I presented the opening talk to a bunch of Republican congressmen's wives, and a lot of the things that we said in this presentation, as though we were a Soviet officer, were so anti-American. And I had one lady walk up to me after I'd done the briefing. She said, "You make me so mad I couldn't scratch your eyeball." And anyway, then the other time that comes to mind was that we went down to Panama to Howard Air Force Base, and I did that same program there. And a Russian uniform that's made for that climate is not made for Howard Air Force Base at Panama.
I can imagine, yeah.
But anyway, that was a good job. And then as I ended that, AFMPC called me up and said, "Had you any more problems with eyesight?" And I said, "No." And they sent me to Andrews Air Force Base, got me checked out, and I was good to go. So that was when I got sent to Mountain Home, Idaho, got checked out in the F-111, and then began to fly as an F-111 Wizzo and I Wizzo there for a couple years.
Okay, so you had some acting in your background as well with your history.
I think I did some. I think we did Cheaper by the Dozen when I was in high school. But that's not the extent of my acting experience growing up.
Apparently, you were very accurately and well played a Russian soldier. So that's also when you became a writer. Is that correct? You did a lot of writing with the history office?
Yeah, I did a lot of writing. Actually, when we were at Mountain Home, Idaho, I had tried when I love books, and it doesn't really matter the topic: Civil War, military history, Air Force history. I had tried when I was stationed in Korea as a second lieutenant to get some of the different Air Force magazine and different on to send me review books, and they weren't interested. They're like, "What does the second lieutenant know?" So I tried again when I was there at the Office of Air Force History, and the spigot opened on book reviews books at that point. And so I got lots of books to do book reviews. And anyway, so we were out in Idaho, and I was looking for another job, and so a copy of the Tac Attack magazine floated across my desk where I was working in wing headquarters there. Same kind of job I had when I was at Hahn Air Base in Germany. And when I flipped it open, it said, we're looking for an editor. So I had done a lot of book reviews and things from when I had started to get in the spigot open when I was in the Air Force History Office. And so I've submitted a resume and a lot of the published articles and book reviews I've done to TAC Attack, and they hired me. And so I got hired there. And the first 2 years that I was at TAC Attack, 1 week out of the month, I would get sent back out to Idaho, TDY, to get my flying in on the 111.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that 2 years, I had made the necessary days for flight pay. So I didn't have to make that trip back and forth anymore. That was quite interesting. Basically, I'd do my flying during the day, and then the evenings, I'd do the book reviews and work on my stuff for the Tag Attack magazine, and I'd send those by overnight. The folks back in the office would, transcribe those into word processing. But anyway, so then I got hired there, Tag Attack, and did that for 4 years.
And that was that's the Tactical Air Command's safety periodical, is that correct?
That was the Tactical Air Command safety periodical, monthly safety periodical.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then after I've been there, 4 years, they called me up and said, "Have you had more problems with your eyes?" And I said, "No." So, anyway, I got reevaluated, and then I was returned back to flying stats, and that's when I did the F-111. I ended up my career actually up at Ramstein headquarters editing their safety magazine, and I got signed over to Spain, Torrejon, Spain,
mm-hmm.
and worked there at 16th Air Force, and got sent all over 16th Air Force TDY for site surveys for possible wartime bed down, that kind of thing. And then my last 2 years in the Air Force, the editor of USAFA safety magazine,
okay,
who was a civilian, he was a GS civilian, decided he wanted to come back to the States, and so he contacted me. I had done some writing for them, and asked me if I'd like to come up and take over that magazine, Air Scoop, and I did that. Ended up finished my last 2 years on active duty there, and then I retired out from there. My wife and I came back to Kentucky.
Okay, so you spent a lot of time overseas, sounds like.
Yeah, we did. We spent, like I said, we started out, I guess, my first private remote in Korea, and then England and Germany and Spain. Yeah, and then, of course, I did lots of TDYs out of 16th Air Force to those different southern region NATO bases that, might be potential bed down sites. So, yeah, we did a lot of traveling, a lot of TDY overseas.
Cool. So then back in Kentucky, I understand you were a reference librarian and then the editor of the Kentucky Historical Society's Kentucky Ancestors, right?
Yeah, when I came back to Kentucky, I went to University of Kentucky and got my master's degree in history. And I worked there. We'd go over in the mornings and work part-time for different jobs, and then get a bite of lunch, and then my grad classes were all in the afternoon. I did that. And then after doing that for a while, I got hired at Kentucky Historical Society, and I first worked there as their reference librarian, which was a very interesting job, kind of job you need to have when you're new to a place like that, and you want to become familiar with what's available. And then we had two different magazines. We had one called the Kentucky Historical Society Register, and we had one called Kentucky Ancestors, which was local history and genealogy. And they had some problems with their getting things out on schedule and getting things edited and properly proofread and all. So unfortunately, some of my coworkers got fired, and they knew that I had this background in publication during the Air Force career, so they hired me to take over Kentucky Ancestors. And well, like I said, I first started as the reference librarian, and then Kentucky Ancestors, and I did that until I basically finished up at the Kentucky Historical Society. And then I came back to my hometown county, Mercer County, and got a job there for a few years as the reference librarian there. And then I ended up basically retiring from public employment after that job, and just been enjoying retirement and taking care of the 1 acre lot that we have here property and those sorts of things.
So we're just about out of time. I'd like to get your final thoughts, but first, a word of thanks to our listeners and to let everyone know that Heritage Minutes and Heritage Minutes specials are all available anytime at usafa.org/heritagehub. That's usafa.org/heritagehub. Heritage Minutes publish the first and third Sundays in audio and video. Heritage Minutes specials like this one drop the second and fourth Sunday of every month. You can also find us by searching Heritage Minutes on YouTube, and you can catch This Day in Air Force Academy History every day on KAFA, the Academy's radio station, 97.7 FM, or online at usafa.edu/radio. So, Don, a very interesting life, well lived. Any final words for our audience?
Well, the last thing I'd like to just leave with the folks that have taken their time to listen to this podcast, I would encourage our listeners today to learn as much as they can about the history and the heritage of our Air Force and of the Air Force Academy. And if you've never had the opportunity, I'd suggest making a trip to the U.S. Air Force Museum up at Rightmyer Air Force Base, and that's where you'll find the Doolittle Goblin today, if you're interested in that. And I'd also encourage listeners to learn more about the Air Force Academy and the men and women who've gone there and made a contribution to our nation's defense and aerospace history. And I appreciate the opportunity to share those reminiscences and experiences I had with you, Steve, and with those who will listen to it. And I appreciate the time and effort that you and I both put into it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. So thank you very much, Don.
I thank you very much, and I appreciate what you guys do. Thanks so much.
I'm Steve Simon. Thanks for listening. Find more episodes at usafa.org/heritagehub.